Oh, we back, baby! Football is back, and fantasy football is just around the corner, so it is time to review every single AFC team. I'm going to be covering as many players as I can across all 16 teams, which is way too many players, but I'm going to do it for fantasy. So pull up a chair, sit back, relax, and enjoy this journey with me through the AFC. Alright, so the first team we're going to talk about here is the Buffalo Bills. One of the easier teams to talk about, mostly due to the familiarity with a lot of these players under the same offensive system that they've been under for a number of years now. You look at Josh Allen first as the quarterback, and to quote a scout from TF2, I don't know how many people will get this reference, but here it goes. Grass grows, birds fly, sun shines. Josh Allen's going to be the first QB off the board. That's just how it's going to be. Josh Allen is most likely going to be drafted in the first 2 rounds in the second round of a lot of fantasy drafts. There's nothing really new to say about Josh Allen that hasn't been said over the last 4 to 5 years that he was also the first QB off the board. He's going to be very consistent, very safe floor. You know you're going to get a top 3 quarterback out of him. You look at the same with James Cook. Going back to last season with him, he was so good last year. He was the rushing leader, another season with double-digit touchdowns. It's once the second he got paid, they were like, oh yeah, we got to use him. So they freaking used him. He's probably one of the safest running back options that you can get in the draft, even though he is still kind of a higher end. You have to draft him in the first round. The only thing that concerns me is Joe Brady coming out and saying that they gave him so many touches last year, they might need to pull back a little bit, maybe give it to Ray Davis or any of the other running backs on the roster. If he does fall, it will be a slight fall. He'll still be within the top 10. But overall, I think people are going to really enjoy drafting James Cook this year. Khalil Shakir, another guy where it's like, hey, he's the most okay receiver in the National Football League. And I mean that as a compliment for fantasy. If you need an emergency flex spot starter, if you just need like a safe 10 points and you're desperate, you know who can get you those 10 points? Khalil Shakir. He's done it so many times. Like 5 receptions, 60 yards. That's his stat line of any game you'll find him in, and he's just going to continue to do that going into this season as well. He'll be a very safe, like top 35 wide receiver. He's not anybody's like favorite receiver. He's not the sleek and sexy option. Sleek and sexy option going into this season, but he's going to be a reliable player nonetheless if you have him on your depth chart. The only real difference here this season is DJ Moore. DJ Moore coming in, I'm a big DJ Moore guy. I think he's very underrated. I don't think enough people talk about him, but a lot of people are not excited about him going to Buffalo this season. They think there's going to be some sort of catch or he's not going to do that well. I personally think he is a better receiver than people give him credit for. I think he's the closest thing they have to a wide receiver 1 on this football team. They wouldn't have traded a second round pick if they didn't think he could develop into that. So even though if they do spread the ball around this season, I think it's very likely he could end up as a top 20 receiver at the end of the year, maybe even a little bit higher than that. And I'm not too high on Dalton Kincaid this season. It's just, I've seen enough of him in the last few years. Dawson Knox kind of hurts his value, just him still being on the team, taking over half of his play time, and the fact that he does get injured quite often a lot, even when he's starting to build momentum. I have seen that he's starting to become like a bit of a ball hog for the end zone, and that could be good for him and good for this team. It could make him a fantasy option, but at that point, he'll be a guy that's either at the very end of your drafts or on the waiver wire, and there are other tight ends I'd rather go for in that position over Kincaid. The New York Jets. Oh no, this is quite jarring. Like quite a stark contrast to go from the Bills straight over to the New York Jets. If I could review this team in so many words, it would be 2027. Wait for 2027. That's what it feels like this team is for. There are a lot of young names here. There are a lot of guys where it looks like maybe next year this can really develop into a fun looking offense. I want to be invested in the Jets this year. It just doesn't seem like it's going to happen this year. Not with, especially who's at the quarterback position, Geno freaking Smith. Now, I'm a Seahawks fan. I have respect for Geno. Coming into this season, I saw what he did on the Raiders. I don't think a Jets reunion is going to save him. I think it's a fun story. I love the idea that he's going to be on the Jets this year. It doesn't mean he's going to make him fantasy relevant. It doesn't mean he's going to elevate the pieces around him. He's better than Brady Cook. Sure, I'll give him that. He's better than Brady Cook. Good on you, Geno. Good on you. I at least like Garrett Wilson. I'm a big fan of Garrett Wilson, which is funny because he always finds a way to just kind of let me down. But hey, you know what? You know what they always say? Fifth season's the charm. this is the year. This is gonna be the year of Garrett Wilson. Just you watch. Maybe he doesn't have the quarterback. Maybe he doesn't have the offensive line. Maybe they don't have the defense. Maybe they don't have the head coach. Maybe I'm convincing myself that this is not going to be his year, but I'm just going to go with it. With Kenyon Sadiq and Omar Cooper Jr., they're two rookies going into this season. I like them a lot. I think Kenyon Sadiq has a lot of talent. We saw how he did at the Combine. I think he's going to be great going into the future, but I think this season, I think he's going to need some time to develop. He didn't have a huge amount of production in college. I think it's going to be more like what Colston Loveland was last year, where they're going to slowly bring him into the offense, and I think we'll start to see some flashes later in the season. Same thing with Omar Cooper Jr. I think their value is going to come way later into the season, but I don't think they're super worth it right now, especially with Kenyon Sadiq dealing with an injury. He's been out all of training camp, so he's already falling behind a little bit. So that's the only reason I have Mason Taylor here, is because maybe he might provide something. If this is a truly like pass happy offense, then we could see some value out of some of these other guys like Mason Taylor, maybe Adonai Mitchell, who I really liked last season. But yeah, in general, this is a team that needs a fresh coat of paint, a new quarterback, a young quarterback, and a new head coach, an offensive minded head coach. Because I've been hearing the news, I've been hearing training camp that apparently this offense looks great. They're having great practices. Nobody's dropping any passes. They're going down the field. They're getting touchdown after touchdown after touchdown. But they're facing the Jets defense, and that's not a real NFL defense. They didn't record a single interception last season. That is not an NFL defense. That is a JV high school defense, not even varsity. Like, at that point, you're better just, facing air. At least a gust of wind could make you get an incomplete pass. That might be better than actually facing the Jets defense. Like, even Breece Hall, I'm not particularly excited about Breece this season. It kind of feels like a Beauty and the Beast situation where he's fallen in love with his captor because they just wouldn't let him go. So now he's just stuck there in forever purgatory, and he'll be okay, I guess. ADP is right where it should be. It's around like late teens to like early 20s area, but I'm just not. There are a lot of other running backs I would rather take a risk on than going for Breece Hall, personally. The Miami Dolphins. I think the Jets have some competition in terms of how low can you get on an offense. I mean, I guess it's not the worst in the world. You do have Malik Willis. You do have Devon Achane. I at least see a world where this offense could be competent if they rely solely on the run game. If they do sort of a poor man's Lamar Jackson, Derrick Henry situation, and I know they're totally different styles of players versus what the Dolphins have, but stick with me, and you lean into the defense doesn't know who's going to run the ball. Is it going to be Achane? Is it going to be Malik Willis? And you run your plays around that. And I think that's the only way you can really get this moving, because it might not be through the air. I know Malik Willis throws a good deep ball. Who's he going to throw it to? Tutu Atwell? I'm not invested particularly in any of these receivers. Caleb Douglas, not too impressed by him particularly. He could have probably been drafted a little later than when they actually drafted him. But you know what? Beggars can't be choosers. Anybody can show up and suddenly become the number one receiver when this is the wide receiver depth chart. It looks kind of like a parody. I feel a little bad for Malik Washington because he's the only receiver on here that I actually kind of like. I like him as a player. He's not a 1. They'll have to be pretty creative with how they get him the ball. But I could see a world where if this offense is not absolutely terrible, where he could be like a constant waiver wire pickup for people. That he would be constantly recommended in waiver wire videos of guys to replace for bye weeks. I could possibly see that. Devon Achane is one of the most interesting ones for me here, though, because he was so good last year. He was so consistent, and now you put him on this offense, and a lot of people are super down on him. And I am a little bit too, but I don't think I'm down on him as much as everybody else, because there are a couple options that could spin out of this. Garbage time is a big thing. If this team is stuck in garbage time, I could see Malik Willis giving him so many dump-off passes. In PPR, he could be an absolute monster. However, if they can't even get it going in garbage time, then yeah, he's gonna have a bad season. I think Malik Willis could have some value in fantasy this year simply because of his running ability. I think that will give him a shot to be a sort of waiver wire pickup. I don't think he's going to be a consistent starter much at all this season. I just don't think there's enough around him to make that possible. And I'm still not fully sold on Malik Willis as a player. As much as I've liked what I've seen from him on the Packers, that's only like 5 or 6 games that he started. I need to see more than that. And they're not putting him in a position to succeed right now. Overall, the expectations are so low, there is a chance that they could exceed them, that players like Devon Achane and Malik Willis can be better than people expect. I want to see Chris Bell when he comes back and he's healthy in the second half of the year to see how he does. And then there's Greg Dulcich. Look, people are telling me like Greg Dulcich is a good player. I don't really know much, if hardly anything, about Greg Dulcich, at least not enough to form like a real genuine fantasy opinion. This is what the Dolphins do. This is what they do to you. They give you a player where it's like, hey, we're going to make this guy that you don't know the starter, so you got to have an opinion on him, but I don't have an opinion on him.
So now I'm forced to have an opinion on a player that I never thought I would ever have an opinion on, because they decide this is the guy that's going to be their starting tight end for their team, and I'm not buying it. I'm not sold. I'm not doing it. Moving on.
The New England Patriots, one of the biggest surprises of last season, led by near MVP Drake May. He was one of the best fantasy quarterbacks last year. This offense, despite having a lack of like truly strong pieces around him, still managed to be very successful. So why am I a little worried about them this year? I don't know. I think it has something to do with like last season's paper thin schedule. And I saw how they performed against teams with much better defenses, especially in the playoffs, where they continuously struggled, and now they're going into this season with a much stronger schedule. They did go out of their way to address this though, with AJ Brown and Romeo Doubs now coming in and replacing Stephon Diggs. With AJ Brown, a lot of people are super hyped for him this season. I have a bit of a hot take, at least I hope it's not a hot take. I don't think he's going to be too different than he was on the Eagles. I think on paper, it looks like he could do a lot more. But I think this team is going to be similar to the Eagles, where he's not going to be featured as much in the game plan every single week. I think there are going to be some weeks where they're more focused on the ground attack or spreading the ball around to some of their other receivers, and they have a lot of really good receivers. There are going to be games where AJ Brown is going to disappear. He'll have a lot of great games, and I think he does improve this offense quite a bit overall to have him there. I think he's going to finish pretty much at the end of the top 10, maybe even right outside of the top 10 by the end of this season. And I'm glad that they brought AJ Brown in, because I'm not so sure about Romeo Doubs in this position either. I like Romeo Doubs, but he's not a 1. And when they signed him on and they didn't have the trade set in stone, I was a little worried that they were going to make Romeo Doubs like the pure number 1 receiver on this team, and I just don't think that's the right fit for him. But having him as the 2, that's perfect. That's exactly where he should be. He will be right around top 30, top 40-ish wide receiver area. Pretty similar to where he was on the Packers. I don't see much change there. You have Demario Douglas and Kayshon Boutte and Matt Collins. In case of injuries, any one of them could be pretty decent starters or fill-in flex guys. With the running back position, they got to give it to Travion. Mike Vrabel, I know you like the veterans. Travion Henderson is in year 2. Okay, you cannot keep going with the idea of we want to give the more experienced guy the ball. Travion Henderson is in year 2. You saw what he could do last year. He changed parts of your offense when you actually used him, because he's one of the best home run hitters in the league. He can get a 60-yard touchdown just like that, just as much as any other running back out there. If they use him more, then there's a chance that Travion Henderson could be a steal this year. There's a possibility that he could be one of the elite running backs in the NFL if you gave him a proper workload. Instead of 50-50, give him 60-40, maybe even 70-30. You don't need to completely get rid of Stevenson. I like him fine, but Travion Henderson is the guy you should be putting it all on his shoulders. You should give him the run game, because you never know what he could do and add that explosive element to your offense. I was a little worried going into the season about Drake May and where he was getting ranked, because earlier on, he was like QB3 and he was getting his draft as high as the 3rd round. And I thought that was just too much, for not saying that he doesn't deserve it necessarily, but you could get much better QBs later in the draft without having to spend such a high capital on him. It's cooled down a little bit. He's now QB4, I think. He's either still QB3 or QB4. He's right up there with Joe Burrow, but he's moved down to the 5th round. That's a lot more doable, and I could see why people would want to draft him in the 4th or 5th round of your drafts. Then you have Hunter Henry. Oh, he's a sneaky one, isn't he? A real sneaky player. He always seems to find a way to get into the top 10 of tight ends. And then you look at the end of the season, it's like, how did he get there? And it's kind of infuriating, but he will probably continue to be a top 10 tight end that will continuously find himself on the waiver wire for many weeks to come. AFC North time, we got the Pittsburgh Steelers, and I am super excited for this one, if you could tell by my face. There's not a lot of like spark with this team. They have players. I can see that they have like physical players that I'm looking at, but not a lot of them are exciting to me. But maybe if I talk about it will be better. Aaron Rodgers. Nope, that didn't help. Aaron Rodgers, I guess he'll find a way as like a waiver wire option at some points, but he's kind of top 20 at best for quarterbacks. Like, I'm just not super excited of what he can bring or provide to this team. I don't think he makes the team better or makes the team worse. I think it's just in the middle. He's like, I don't know, he's like lettuce to a sandwich for me. Lettuce doesn't add anything to the sandwich. That's what he is. He's the lettuce of the Pittsburgh Steelers. Like, I don't see him elevating DK Metcalf, which, by the way, I'm done with him. Like, I'm done. For years, I tried. I really tried. I really thought, like, you know, last year could be the year. The year before that could be the year where I've invested in him in fantasy time and time again, and I'm done. He's not going to be a top 10 to 15 wide receiver. I don't even know if he's going to be a top 30 wide receiver by the end of this season. I just don't see it in him. I like Michael Pittman more than I do DK Metcalf, even though Metcalf is supposed to be the guy because you paid him all this money. But Michael Pittman had a pretty good year on the Colts, a pretty underrated year. I don't think a lot of people talk about him, and I think he can actually make this offense better. And I could see him being better for the offense than Metcalf. Jeremy Bernard is a rookie they drafted in the second round. I don't see any immediate value from him right now. I think he's competing with the wide receiver 3 role for Roman Wilson, but he seems like they can do some like fun trick plays and gadget plays with him right away. You know, anything to add some excitement for this offense. Maybe Mike McCarthy can do that he can add that sort of excitement into this team. The run game, though, I actually really like Jaylen Warren. Nobody likes Jaylen Warren. Nobody wants to keep Jaylen Warren around except for me. I have him on my rosters. I have him on my dynasty rosters, and nobody seems to care about him. But I think in this offense, he works really well. I liked him as a runner last year, and he is fully set up to be their only pass-catching option in the backfield. He was pretty much the closest thing they had to a wide receiver 1 last year, the amount of dump-offs he was getting from Rodgers. So I think he's going to be a bit of an underrated option that I do think should be drafted. Rico Dowdle is going to be more of the change of pace back here. He's a bit bigger, a bit tougher. Maybe you can try to get that spark back of what he did on the Panthers last year. How he did, you know, multiple 200-yard games, like really crazy out of nowhere. Maybe you could try to get that back, try to focus a bit on a run game here to make this offense run. And then Pat Freiermuth is he's more of a waiver wire tight end than he is a guy that you'll have consistently on your roster. But yeah, this offense does not really excite me. I want to go to a more exciting one. And would you look at that, a more exciting offense right here, the Baltimore Ravens. They got new uniforms, they got a new coach, and they got a new attitude. Maybe. I'm not at their training camps, so I don't know. But Lamar Jackson is Lamar Jackson. I know he had a down year last year, but when you're a player that is as good as him, the best dual threat QB in the entire league, sometimes people will just give you grace of a down year. Like I think a lot of people expect the massive bounce back to be where he was before, which is one of, if not the best quarterback in the league in fantasy, and he is being drafted as the second best, which is right where he should be. Derrick Henry, he might be getting older. I'm still going to take him until I actually see the decline, until I see Father Time actually slowing him down. I'm going to take him every season. And you know what? That might come back to bite me. It might bite me in the butt. But you know what? I'll just take that risk because I like Derrick Henry that much, and he has helped me in so many seasons. He is more of a respect pick where I will be totally fine if he ends up having this season be the down year. I'm fine taking that risk. With the receivers here, Zay Flowers, massive contract for this guy. $35 million a year, over $100 million guaranteed, and he is going to be just fine. I don't think he's going to be quite in the top 10 again this year. I think he's going to be probably closer to 15 to 20 range, which is a bit closer to what he was in previous seasons. I think I have an understanding of what he is. He's a good receiver. He is a good starting receiver for this team. He's been it for a few years. I don't think he is a truly game-changing wide receiver, and I hope people don't overdraft him off of where he finished last season. Overall, there's not too much to talk about the rest of the players here. Rashad Bateman is sort of just like a deep ball threat and nothing really more. When Lamar Jackson had his near MVP season 2 years ago, he was fantasy relevant. Last season, he wasn't. So if Lamar Jackson is performing at his usual level, it might make Rashad Bateman a little better. But we also have a couple rookies coming in like Elijah Sarrett, Jacoby Lane. Elijah Sarrett could be their replacement for Isaiah Likely. He plays this really interesting, like, he's a big guy that goes like intermediate throws. It seems like he is best at catching 10 to 15 yard passes, middle of the field, and that could be his use for him there. Hopefully, maybe he might replace Mark Andrews because he's still there. Mark Andrews, he's still there. And I think he's basically held up by how many touchdowns he gets. If he doesn't get a lot of touchdowns this season, Mark Andrews is probably not going to be very fantasy viable pretty much at all. Jacoby Lane, we've seen a lot of these like human highlight reel type players get really hyped up in the offseason, and then they just can't really get on the field a lot. It doesn't translate. But people really love him in camp right now. They're saying he's a standout. So maybe a guy to look out for down the line. Not a guy to draft right now, but yeah, if you're in Dynasty, maybe. Cincinnati Bengals, pound for pound, one of the best overall teams in all of fantasy football that provides so much value. One of the best QBs, one of the best wide receivers, a top 10 running back, a tight end is and a top 20 wide receiver when they're healthy. That's the big caveat here. There's, you're going to talk a lot about health during these like team overviews. So I'm going to use a new term. It's going to be plot hole. Here's what the team looks like on paper. The plot hole is they could get injured. Joe Burrow could get injured and it could ruin the entire season for the rest of these guys like it's done in years past. Jamar Chase could get hurt. T. Higgins has history with injury problems. But if that's not the case, if injuries are not a part of this equation, if there are no holes in the plot of this play, then this team is going to be absolutely dynamite this season. Joe Burrow, when he's playing, is going to be one of the top quarterbacks in the league, especially since their defense, which might be a little better than it was last season, but it's still generally probably going to be pretty bad. It's going to force him to pass the ball a bunch to his best receivers, and this offense is going to score 30 points a game. He is, in terms of fantasy football, the best pure passer quarterback in the league, where not a dual threat, just a pure passer. He's the best one you could possibly get. Jamar Chase, right up there. He's, debated as possible number 1 overall pick. For me personally, I think I would actually choose Puka Nacua over Jamar Chase. For me, he's number 2, but he's within the conversation of number 1 pick in most fantasy drafts this year. Chase Brown is a roller coaster taking on a human form. He was so many ups and downs last year, from the ultimate lows to the supreme highs of winning people leagues, including me. Never doubted you once for a second, buddy. Don't except for like weeks 1 through 8 where I completely doubted you and tried to trade you as much as I could and nobody wanted you, but then I never doubted you. But he's probably going to be a top 10 running back this year again. As long as Joe Burrow's in the lineup, that will be the best version of Chase Brown. But in this situation right now, he is the backfield. He's going to get 90% of the carries. He's going to get a bunch of passes to him. He is built for this team. He is built to be the bell cow of the Cincinnati Bengals. And T. Higgins, I'm not the biggest T. Higgins guy in the world, but you got to look out for some of these receivers that have been like the wide receiver 2s on their teams for many years, because there are a lot of times where they get undervalued by some people in their drafts, where, the name's not hot. The name's not like a new name. We've seen them a lot. They're not the number 1 receiver on their team, and they tend to get undervalued quite a bit. So in some leagues, look out for that, because he could actually be a great value pick if he falls. And then their tight end is a non-factor. He's a complete non-factor. I had to look up who their tight end was. And then after looking it up, figure out who was actually the starting tight end of the guys they had. And Mike Gesicki was the closest I got. I think he's their starter. I'm pretty sure he's the starter. He's not going to be fantasy relevant at all in any case, except if these guys get hurt. If Jamar Chase gets hurt, if T. Higgins gets hurt, then he does become fantasy viable, but that's the only possible option. The Cleveland Browns, this one upsets me because I look at this team and I think they have so much, but I think there's a lot of potential here, and that there's a lot of good talent from some of the wide receivers they drafted with Casey Conception and Denzel Boston. They'll probably overtake Jerry Jeudy. You have Quinshawn Judkins, and you have Harold Fannin Jr., all these young, really good players, and then it's all kind of ruined when it comes down to the quarterbacks, when you have Shedeur Sanders and Deshaun Watson. Deshaun Watson looks like he's going to start the season. I don't know why. Well, I do know why. It's because they paid him a lot of money and they're forcing him to start. If he starts, this offense will be dead. This offense, I don't find any value out of this offense if he's playing. I don't know who he's going to target. I think it hurts a lot of players like Harold Fannin and any of the possible receivers, because he's throwing for 200 yards at best in his games, and he's going to make the offense look ugly, bowling shoe ugly, as Jim Ross would say. And I find myself defending Shedeur Sanders. He's not a great quarterback. I wouldn't even say he's a good quarterback yet at all, but at least he was trying. At least he was going out there and providing some sort of spark when he just chucks it 50 yards down the field and he's like, go get it, somebody. He had a connection with Harold Fannin. If Shedeur Sanders is in the lineup, Harold Fannin is a, top 5 to 7 tight end this season. If he's in the lineup, I could see someone like Denzel Boston, who was very good at getting deep balls last year, being very valuable, but they aren't. And it's going to switch off between the two. I think both of them are going to end up playing this season. I don't think it's going to be an easy case for either of them. I think they're both going to struggle. I think this offense is generally going to really struggle. I like Quinshon Judkins, but he's not going to do well in this offensive setup. I like Quinshon Judkins, but he's not going to do well in this offensive setup. I think he's going to be one of the lower ranked running backs of all the starters, simply because they're going to be behind in a lot of games. It's going to force them to throw the ball a lot. And he wasn't used as a pass catcher last season. They didn't use that as a part of his game. I think it is a part of his game. I think they could use it if they wanted to, but they chose not to. So unless their new coach, Todd Monken, has got some tricks up his sleeve, which I'm sure he has, and he's going to have to use all of them. With this team, he's going to have to use every trick just to make things work. Unless that happens, I just don't see him moving outside of... He's not even going to be top 25 running backs in my mind. I think he's going to be pretty low down there. It sucks. I want to like this team, but again, it's the Browns. The Browns are going to Brown. The Jets are going to Jets. It's meant to be. It's serendipity. It's harmony. The Houston Texans. Over the last year and a half to 2 years, I know there hasn't been a lot of positives to take out of the offense of the Texans, but I want to focus on some of the changes they made, particularly with the run game and the offensive line. They changed up their offensive line this last year they're not necessarily better, but I noticed something, that the guys that were bringing in were much better run blockers than they were pass blockers, and that's who they were replacing. So it seems like there might be this movement to make this team a more run-heavy offense, a more run-first type of offense, to sort of get some stress off of CJ Stroud, which he's going to need a little bit of that. He's kind of moving more into game manager mode what we've seen over the last couple of years. And David Montgomery, look, if your offensive line's not great, it's good to have a guy that can run through guys, that can plow through the defensive line. He's going to need to do a lot of that. He's going to need to be tough, put on his big boy boots, and he's going to need to run through that. If he can, I think he is a good starting running back to have. I think he'll end up somewhere around like top 20 area, probably not too high. I don't expect him to be like a top 15 to top 10 running back, but it's a good player to go out and get when your offensive line is still recovering, essentially. And that's an easy way to put it. Stroud is just, to say he hasn't been impressive the last couple seasons is a bit generous, at least from a fantasy standpoint. He has had there's not been a single time this whole season where anybody's like, I was really struggling. I thought I was going to lose my week, and CJ Stroud saved me. CJ Stroud kept me from losing my week with that great game he had. Nobody said that anytime in the last 2 years, because it just hasn't happened. The ceiling is just really low on Stroud, even with, a player like Nico Collins, who is going to be a top 10 receiver this year. I think he could be a little bit better than what people are actually drafting him at, which is at the end of top 10, but I think he could actually be closer to top 5 than top 10 for me personally. But CJ Stroud he's not been super fantasy viable the last couple of years. There's a chance he could be better this season, that maybe this offense could take a step forward. I don't know if it necessarily makes him a starting QB, but maybe he can work his way back into being a decent backup QB or a super flex QB, because Nico Collins is great and Tank Dell is back. And Tank Dell, even if he's not a great wide receiver, mindset wise, it's great to have a player like that back, that, great motivation, gives the team like a little bit of a morale boost, especially CJ Stroud, because he loves Tank Dell, and that super affected him with his injury. So maybe psychologically it could make him a little bit more confident heading into this season. That never hurts. Jaden Higgins could be a good wide receiver 2 this year. I saw near the end of last season, he was starting to put something together. He was starting to look pretty good. I don't know exactly how high he's going to go. Like, as of right now, it's still like he's trying to compete to get out of like top 40 wide receiver range, but I could see him having a bit of a year 2 jump and being a good like depth piece on somebody's roster on like the backups list, or maybe a flex option. I could see that as a possibility. Woody Marks, it's if David Montgomery goes down. I think he'll still play a little bit of a role. He wasn't terrible on the Texans last year, but they were still one of the least impressive run games last year. So I think he still has a role to play. It's just not that strong, but he's one of the better handcuffs in the league. And Dalton Schultz had his best season on the Texans that I can remember. He was pretty like forgotten about last season, but he like inched his way into the top 10 by the end of the year because of injuries around him, and he was very consistent. He was getting a lot of targets and a lot of catches. He was making the most of what he had, and he could be one of the more underrated pieces that you're definitely going to find on the waiver wire this season. The Jacksonville Jaguars. Yes, finally a team that I'm really excited to talk about because there's so many interesting options and players to talk about on this team. And I'm going to start with the wide receivers because you got this freaking fatal 4-way set up here between these 4 guys trying to be the main target for Trevor Lawrence, which there's probably not going to be a main target. It's probably going to be everybody's going to eat a little bit. But each of these guys are so different and so fascinating, and I want to cover all of them. Travis Hunter probably has the least value of the 4 guys here, mostly just because I think he's going to play more defense this season than offense. I think on offense, he's going to be a bit more of a luxury than a necessity with the other 3 around, and I think the defense is probably sorely needing him more, and he could provide a lot more value there. He'll still be used somewhat, but he's more of a gadget player. Jacoby Myers is a good, solid receiver. He's been a good, solid receiver for many years. We kind of know exactly what he is right now. I think he'll be pretty much in the top 30, but he's going to be drafted way, way lower. He's going to be way late in drafts, and I think you can get him for a pretty good deal, and he will definitely outdo any expectations of what you see of him or where you draft him. Brian Thomas Jr., there are some people that really like Brian Thomas Jr. this season. I remember him last season. I remember what he did. Could he bounce back this year? Yes, I think he can be better. However, I don't think he's going to have this sort of what you would expect a wide receiver 1 role to be. I think he's going to be more of an explosive, deep threat type player. I think he's going to be going for, home run sort of touchdowns rather than being a consistent like, oh, I'm looking to you every single down. But I think the player with the best possible chance, the one that's going to be the closest to this, is Parker Washington. This guy, I think he's the real deal. I've thought about this a little bit throughout the season. I remember watching him last season coming in relief of Brian Thomas Jr., of Travis Hunter, and he was so good. Way better than anyone's expectations of him. And I think going into this season, I like his setup as the slot receiver. I like what he could be in Liam Cohen's offense because I've seen Liam Cohen be the offensive coordinator for the Bucs, be on the same team for the Rams, and the slot receivers that he played with when he was running the offense, they were incredible those seasons. It was Cooper Kupp, it was after his Triple Crown season, and then Chris Godwin. Both those receivers had season-ending injuries, but before their injuries, they were both the number 1 receivers. The number 1 receivers in fantasy football before they got hurt. Like, this isn't a small thing. This is a guy that wants to use somebody in the slot, and if you have someone talented enough, he can absolutely bring the best out of them. I'm not saying he's going to be the number 1 receiver, but I'm saying of anyone that has a chance to truly break out in this offense, I think it's going to be him. I think people are going to realize it the closer we get to the season, and I think it's going to get to a point where we're going to have an interesting conversation of where he's going to get drafted, because I think he's getting drafted like wide receiver 25, somewhere between 25 to 30. It might shoot up the more and more people start talking about him, and then we'll have to have that conversation of, is he overvalued? Is he undervalued? But I love this, and I love talking about it because it means this team has a lot of wide receiver depth, a lot of talented pass catchers, including Bretton Strange, who I think is a pretty good tight end, although he's going to be more of a backup tight end rather than anything. But who's this going to benefit the most? Trevor Lawrence, who looked incredible in the second half of last season, the best he's ever looked in his career. If you took the second half of last season and add that to the first half of the season as well, He would have been the number 1 quarterback in all of fantasy last year. Now, that's not sustainable. He's not going to do it again. But if he can get close to that, if he can get close to replicating that sort of success that this team was doing against really good teams too. This wasn't just like bottom feeders. He's going to be a top 10 quarterback this season and probably higher than that. This offense is going to surprise some people. Even the running backs, like Bashal Tutin, is, from all the reports, is looking great in training camp, which is a good sign. That's exactly what we want of him. We don't know how he would look with like a big substantial workload, but we know he can catch passes out of the backfield. We know he's fast. And we saw last season that a good, decent chunk, like a quarter of his touches, turned into touchdowns. Like, they liked using him in the red zone. So that's another thing that's going to benefit this team and Trevor Lawrence. And Chris Rodriguez is a good, solid handcuff running back. He is a player that is going to be more of a first and second down type running back, but he's worked with Liam Cohen before, and he's generally a pretty good player. Gets like 5 yards a carry, always averaged that when he was with the Commanders, so I think he's going to play a decent role there as well. Look out for this team. The Indianapolis Colts, they were so stupidly productive in the first half of last season. It was incredible. I had never seen quite anything like it, the way they were so efficient on every single drive. And then a lot of people remember the Daniel Jones injury as sort of being the catalyst for a lot of this. What I remember were the weeks slightly before that, the 2 or 3 games before Daniel Jones got hurt, where it seemed like defenses were starting to figure out this team a little bit. They were starting to look at them and be like, okay, if we just stop Jonathan Taylor, if we just get that guy, then we can put all the pressure on Daniel Jones, and this team is going to falter as a result. Because that's what happens to Daniel Jones sometimes. He is a good quarterback when everything is going right, and he is not nearly as good when things are going wrong. And this season, he's coming off of his torn Achilles, so the dual threat aspect of his game, his ability to scramble, is going to be severely diminished going into this season, at least for, I want to say, the first half of this season, maybe the whole season. I'm still not going to rate him too low. I think people are pretty low on him right now. Coming off of his best season, I at least want to give him some benefit of the doubt and still keep him within the top 20 quarterback range. Tyler Warren, he's in that he's in the Fantastic Four of tight ends right now. He's number 4 right now. There are 2 tiers. There is the Trey McBride, Brock Bowers tier. That's number 1. And then under that is him and his draft buddy, Colston Loveland. He is absolutely, with Michael Pittman gone, I think he's going to take a percentage of some of the looks that were going Michael Pittman's way, especially Josh Downs, who is now back fully into the starting lineup role with Michael Pittman gone. I think he's going to have a big jump up. You can select him pretty late in drafts. I think he is a super late, into the teens sort of rounds of your fantasy football draft, and he is going to absolutely exceed them. And then you have Alec Pierce, the guy that got paid nearly $30 million off of 47 catches. You heard me, nearly $30 million off of 47 catches. But he also had over 1,000 yards. It was over 20 yards per catch that he was averaging. That was number 1 in the league. I am so intrigued by Alec Pierce going into this season because he has shown that he is super efficient as a deep ball threat, and that I think there is a bit more versatility in him. There's a bit more range in his game than we give him credit for. Clearly, them signing him to this amount of money and getting rid of Michael Pittman has to say something. It has to say that they are invested in this player, that they believe in him. I'm not saying he's going to be their wide receiver 1 in like the traditional sense, but is it really that crazy, that out of the ordinary to assume that he could get an extra 20 to 25 catches this season? And if he can keep a similar yards per catch of nearly 20 yards per catch, he was the wide receiver 28 last year. An extra 20 to 25 catches, that could vault him near the top 10. That is the absolute ceiling of where he could be. Now, the floor is pretty much where he was last year, which is close to number 30. So he could be either wide receiver 10 or wide receiver 30. There is a very deep range of where he could be this season. The only caveat is that he's currently hurt at the moment and he's still recovering. They don't know if he's going to be necessarily ready for the start of the season, so that does bring him down a little bit, but I still think the potential that he has this season is a lot higher than a lot of people predict. Jonathan Taylor is the only player I haven't talked about yet. There's a chance that if Daniel Jones is not running as much, maybe he'll look to more dump off passes, get him more involved in the passing game. That could bring up his value even more potentially, but I think for right now he is my 4th ranked running back. I think he's also the 4th ranked running back in ADP right now in most leagues. Pretty safe. I think that's where he should be. Anything else on this team? I mean, Tyler Warren's got some great hair. Like, that is some amazing hair. The Tennessee Titans, they got a new look, a new logo, new fresh coat of paint. And I think with this offense, it's going to be better than it was last year, which isn't saying too much. But I think they made some strides to make this team better. For one, I like their all-bald coaching staff. I like Brian Daboll. I think he's a good offensive coordinator still overall. I think it's a lot harder to keep a job when you're on the New York teams of the Jets and the Giants. So I think both Robert Saleh and Brian Daboll coming in are going to make this team better. With Cam Ward, I think there is a chance he could be fantasy viable. Maybe not a starter, but like he's worth taking really late in drafts as a backup QB or a QB to do for super flex as well. He's someone that late in the season, I remember he was playing much better as the season was going on. Near the end of the season, I remember seeing him make a lot more good plays. And I thought to myself, like, okay, surround him with a better offensive scheme, get some better players around him. I want to see what he can do. Maybe they can have him run the ball a little bit more and have him scramble a bit more like he did when he was in college. I think that's a missing part of his game that can actually really increase his fantasy stock if he does run more. They've got some new receivers on the team, including the number 4 overall pick and the first receiver off the board in this year's draft, Carnell Tate, which is very high for a receiver, especially for a guy that I don't know if he's necessarily like elite wide receiver, like number 1 type of wide receiver. I think he's going to be the number 1 for this team. I think he's going to be, it was a lot to draft him at that point in the draft. Relatively appropriate. His ADP right now, I think, is wide receiver 25, which is a very fair spot to be in because people don't know if he's going to be a truly top end wide receiver, but he is the number 1 receiver for this team. And I can expect him to be very good and have some very good games in there. Wan'Dale Robinson, though, might have more catches overall. I don't think he's going to be a top 10 receiver again. I think that was more just a symptom of them having no receiver depth, losing Malik Neighbors, and then having to rely on Wan'Dale Robinson throughout the season. I struggle to rank where he could be, but in a good scenario, a top 30. I think top 30, like 20 to 30, I think is very fair to rank him. He's not the number 1 wide receiver there, but I think they could find ways to get him the ball, and I think there will be value there. Calvin Ridley, he's literally the bane of my existence on my dynasty team. I'm trying to get rid of him. Nobody wants him. Not a single soul has ever wanted Calvin Ridley. I should have never drafted him. Tony Pollard, I think Tony Pollard is actually one of the more underrated, forgotten about running backs in the league, especially coming off of last season where the whole offense was completely just floundered completely. He was actually a good runner. He just doesn't catch any passes. He just isn't a pass catcher. But as a runner, I remember thinking he was pretty good. If he can get his touchdown marker up this season, he'll probably be a good RB2. Right now, he's very low RB2, maybe even more of just like a flex spot. But he's got some competition, even if it is a 5th round rookie. But with running backs, you never know. You got Nicholas Singleton, who I really liked coming out of college. I liked his film. I like what he can offer. He's shown that he's versatile, that he can be a 3-down running back, that they also used him for kick returns and punt returns, which seems to be the norm now for players coming out of college, showing their versatility like that. But I think Nicholas Singleton, if given the opportunity, can actually make some noise in this backfield. I don't think it's going to be Tajay Spears, but I think Singleton has a chance to do something. Gunnar Helm maybe has a chance to do something. I've seen him, I've seen his film, I've seen what he can do. I like him as a player, but there's a lot of competition for like sleeper tight ends. And as much as I kind of like him, I don't necessarily think he's a shoo-in to be like a top 20 tight end this season, but they're going to be improved, and I want to see to what extent, because this could be a sleeper team going into this season. The Kansas City Chiefs, and there he is, my boy, Kenneth Walker, K9. Thank you, sir, for all the work you've done on the Seattle Seahawks. Thank you so much. I've thought about this on the Seahawks for years because it's a bit of a dual mindset for me. I do think he is one of the pound for pound, one of the most talented running backs in the league. I think he is incredibly fast and elusive and strong and just has a great pass catching ability that isn't focused on a lot, that wasn't always focused on a lot on Seattle. Everybody knows it. Everybody that sees him, they're like, oh, he can really catch passes. Yeah, he's always been able to do that. But there were two things that always held him back. One, it was our horrific offensive line. For many years, he just didn't have the right offensive line around him. But the bigger reason was probably because of the injuries. He always had a lot of injuries. He would constantly be banged up throughout the season. Never any like long-term, like season-ending injuries, but he would just be stacking up injuries on his legs, his hips, his groin. He had chest problems. He had bad shoulder. Like, he's been banged up over the last few years, and it happens pretty consistently to him. So I do worry a little bit about him becoming a bell cow running back for that reason. Because that's one of the reasons we split him up with Zach Charbonnet, because I think we wanted to keep him healthy throughout the year. And then when Zach Charbonnet got hurt, he came in and won us that Super Bowl because he was healthy. I don't think that would have been possible if we tried to run him like a bell cow. But the Chiefs are not in a position where, beggars can't be choosers. They kind of need a bell cow running back right now because Patrick Mahomes is coming off his destroyed leg and he won't be able to run as much as he used to. Patrick Mahomes had a pretty good season last year, mostly held up by the fact that he was running more than he had at any point in his career. But now that's out of the equation. That's not going to be a part of his game plan now. So I think this is the lowest he's been drafted basically since his first season as a true starter. He's being drafted around like QB 13 to 15. It's pretty low for this guy, but it's expected. They're going to need to feature Kenneth Walker. The hope is he just doesn't get hurt. But if he doesn't get hurt, Kenneth Walker is absolutely going to be a top 10 running back this year. If he doesn't get hurt, he could be a top 5 running back this year. That's how confident I am in him as a player, because I've seen it on Seattle for years. It never really worked on Seattle for all those different reasons I mentioned earlier, but it could work here. Rashee Rice is a borderline top 10 wide receiver. Just keep him out of trouble. Please, just please keep him out of trouble. Like, this guy is ruining his career. He's throwing his life away. Put him in a straitjacket, tie him up to his locker, keep him in-house. Make sure off the field stuff never happens if he's never off the field. Remember those old ads with Baker Mayfield where he would just be living in the Browns stadium? Do that with Rashee Rice, but for real. For real, just do that with him for real. But right now, he's the only receiver of any super worth on this team right now. Xavier Worthy is a deep ball threat, someone that you could probably draft near the end of your drafts if you want to take a risk on one of the fastest players in the NFL. Cyrus Allen, I have him here just for the training camp hype that he is getting. He is a 5th round rookie that, because of the injuries of Rashee Rice and Xavier Worthy in training camp, he became Patrick Mahomes' most targeted option before he got hurt with the shin bruise. I want to see what he does in the preseason. Maybe he can find his way into the starting lineup somehow. And then Travis Kelce is Travis Kelce, who I think is going to have his first season outside the top 10, even if he stays healthy. I think the only reason he got as high as he did last year was because of all the injuries, but if this team stays relatively healthy, I think he's going to have his first season outside the top 10 of tight ends. And at that point, if you're going to draft him, you have to decide, do you want to draft Travis Kelce or do you want to stream tight ends that year? Do you want to be a tight end streamer? Because I like being a tight end streamer. If you draft Travis Kelce, you're pretty much playing Travis Kelce most weeks. So that's what you have to figure out when you go later into your drafts. Some players could be good, some players could be bad. We'll have to see. Los Angeles Chargers. Nope, I'm not gonna do it. I'm not gonna say this is the year. I'm not gonna jinx it. Every time you get super excited about the Chargers, something always happens. And on paper, this is the best the team has probably ever looked, both on offense and on defense. They look like a complete team, but something's gonna go wrong. Something always goes wrong, as they are. Justin Herbert, very good QB. For fantasy, he's gonna be like a low-end QB1 if everything goes right. If things don't go right, then he's closer to a backup than he is a full-on starter that you would start most weeks. And I'm interested in what's going to happen with the receivers, especially with Mike McDaniel now taking over as OC. I want to see how he uses Ladd McConkey or Quentin Johnston or Trey Harris. Ladd McConkey, I think, is going to bounce back. I think he's going to have a season very similar to his rookie year, and he'll be a top 10 to 15 wide receiver this season. Quentin Johnston, I don't know what to think of him. He'll probably do better than what people expect him to do going into the season, but I still think of him as mostly just a deep ball threat that can make plays elsewhere on the field, but I don't think he's going to be the featured guy. I don't think he's going to be the number one receiver. What I've been hearing a lot about recently is that Trey Harris, and they want him to play a big part in this offense as one of the big receivers. So maybe Trey Harris can find his way on the other side of Ladd McConkey, and he could take over as the second receiver. True deep sleeper players going into this season, a massive, massive value. I won't be able to get him because I'm in too many leagues with Chargers fans. Oronde Gadsden was a player I was a lot higher on before they got David Njoku. To be fair, I don't think David Njoku is going to play a huge role in this offense. You know, he's over the age of 30 now. I don't think he's gonna, they didn't pay him like he's going to be a superstar, like starting tight end. Like a lot of starting tight ends get around 8 to 10 million a year. I think he only got a $5 million deal. They didn't pay him like he's going to be a starter. So I still think they want to use Gadsden, who at this point in his career, he's younger, he's more explosive, he's more athletic. And I'm interested to see how Mike McDaniel would use him in the same way he managed to bring the best out of Darren Waller in a previous season. But I don't know, as time goes by, I'm starting to convince myself a little bit more that he's going to do better than people realize. The only player where I might not know how to feel about that yet is Amarian Hampton. You know, a top 10 running back. A lot of people expect that big year 2 jump, especially with Mike McDaniel there. There are a lot of comparisons to Devon Achane, especially how he's going to be used in the passing game, where he was used a lot last year, but he could still be used a lot. There are certain, maybe he's not one of my guys. There are some other guys around the top 10, like Chase Brown, that I would rather try to get. There are certain guys I just like a little bit more. So maybe it's a personal preference, but I could totally see why people would be behind Amarian Hampton 100%. He's going to be a full 3-down back. He's a tough physical runner. I think he will be used pretty heavily. And I think this offense, if everything goes right, will be really good. Okay? They'll be really good. The Denver Broncos are a mixed bag, kind of a complicated team to talk about, but I can just cover them right here. Starting with Bo Nix. When I was looking at Bo Nix, I thought he would be higher in my rankings than he actually was. When I actually ranked him out, I had him at like QB 13. He had kind of a weird, incomplete season last year. He was very frustrating as a starter because you drafted him to be your starting quarterback. You drafted him to be your guy. But then there were so many games last year where he always did just enough to almost convince you like, oh, maybe I should start him next week. And then he looks like crap for 3 quarters. And then finally in the 4th quarter, he just does something crazy. He throws for like 3 touchdowns. He looks bad for 80% of the game and then looks just good enough to where you're like, oh, you know what? He actually did a good game. Maybe I should start him next week. And it's this endless cycle that he got you stuck in that made you think he was better than what he probably actually was last season. And I don't know if I can compete with that again. I don't know if I can do that again with Bo Nix. They made an interesting change at receiver, though. They gave up a 1st-round pick to go get Jalen Waddle, a player that he was a top 20 to 25 wide receiver in that last season on the Miami Dolphins. And I think going into this season with Denver, he is going to be a top 20 to 25 wide receiver. I'm not as high on the Jalen Waddle bring-in. I think this is an offense that still wants to spread the ball around to other people. And if anything, I think having him here will make it easier for some of the others as well to open up the offense and get everybody open to spread the ball around more. I think Courtland Sutton does take a hit. He does fall a little bit, but I don't think he falls as much as people think because I think he is a talented wide receiver. I think he is good. I think he had chances to show it. And I think with Jalen Waddle, he'll have more chances to get open now that less coverage is on him. Pat Bryant is also here. This is a player that a lot of people really like, that they see a lot of potential in. Personally, after they brought in Jalen Waddle and Courtland Sutton, I just don't think it's going to be his year unless injuries happen to those guys to bring him into the starting roster, because I haven't seen enough of him in a big position to truly develop a strong opinion. Troy Franklin is on this roster and on this team because he is Oregon buddies with Bo Nix. He was given quite a big opportunity last year. He was given a lot of chances to shine. He just didn't really do enough with the amount of catches that he was being given, with the amount of targets he was being given. Actually, before I talk about the running backs, Evan Ingram, pretty much a non-factor. He was pretty much a non-factor last season. They teased that he was supposed to be their secret weapon, and then he just was left a secret. Nobody knew about him. He was just a great kept secret. And with the running backs, you have this sort of hydra of running backs, this 3-headed monster of J.K. Dobbins, R.J. Harvey, and Jonah Coleman. J.K. Dobbins, I think I'm the most invested of the 3. The only thing is Jonah Coleman will be competing specifically for the first and second down role. And I think he will have an involvement in this offense, and it kind of just, it dilutes my excitement on the whole thing, because I know Sean Payton, and I know he's going to want to do a big fat running back committee, and I don't know if I'm as into this big fat running back committee as he might be. I think this offense is going to be good, but also frustrating at the same time, if that makes sense. And we have the Las Vegas Raiders, led by the sitcom duo of Fernando Mendoza and Kirk Cousins, and they have the Herculean task of being better than last year's offense. Clint Kubiak moved over from Seattle to the Raiders, and I think he's going to bring out the best that he can in some of these players. With Clint Kubiak, the only thing that people kind of forget about him is that as good as he made the offense, it didn't mean that a lot of the players were like super fantasy viable. Like outside of Jackson Smith and Jigba, can you name any of the other fantasy receivers that were super usable in that time? Not really Rashid Shaheed, not really Cooper Kupp. He's an excellent coordinator, but it doesn't always translate to fantasy. I mean, look at the receivers. We have Trey Tucker and Jalen Naylor. He could bring the best out of these players, but it doesn't mean they're going to be like super relevant fantasy wise. Trey Tucker is probably going to be a wide receiver 30 to 40. We kind of know what he is. Jalen Naylor, he could be interesting because he was always behind Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison. So we never really got to see what he could look like as a full-on starter. Maybe Clint Kubiak's got a big plan for him. So Jalen Naylor is the only player that like maybe a deep sleeper sort of option, a guy that you can definitely get near the end of your drafts and see what you got out of him. I'm more focused on the two big superstars of this team, Ashton Jeanty and Brock Bowers. Ashton Jeanty, he's gonna have a much better year. He's gonna be what everyone thought he was gonna be in his first season. They are going to pound the rock. They are going to be a first down run team. They're probably going to run the ball on second down as well, and he is going to be a major part of that. Could Mike Washington come in? Yeah, but if anything, it's going to be a change of pace. I don't think it's going to be 50-50 running back committee. I think Ashton Jeanty is too talented of a player for them to want to do that. Brock Bowers, he's a dog. We know he's a dog. He's going to be a top 2 tight end. Personally, I'm a big fan of Trey McBride. I just love the player. I think he's the best overall tight end, but Brock Bowers is like right there, neck and neck. These two are going to be highly drafted assets. You have to figure out, if you want to get one of the best tight ends in the league, what are you willing to sacrifice to get it? Because he's going to be a guy you'd have to draft in the second round to pretty much get a player of that caliber. The offensive line is going to be a lot better. They brought in Tyler Lindenbaum. They have a new scheme set up for the offensive line. And to end it off with Mendoza, he's probably not going to have like a super high ceiling. I think he's a good player. I think he could be consistent. I think he'll probably have a high floor, low ceiling. And that was it. That was every single AFC team. I am so tired. I also have to pee. I'm a little bit miserable, but I did it for you. And if you want to support a simpleton like me, leave a like, leave a comment, subscribe. God bless, and I will see you all next time. Oh, I gotta go pee.